No Man Has a Right to Own Mountains, Chapter 11. Both girls rose early the next morning. The wind and rain had spent their fury. Sun was shafting into the room through a gap in the curtains, and the air seemed alive with bird song. "I think we should walk over towards Malc Cowle," Connie suddenly said, as she donned her artificial limb with its new vacuum socket. "We'll get onto the ridge of Rushup Edge and go over to Mam Nick." Rosie nodded, perfectly happy to walk wherever the younger girl decided. "Will we be able to go to the summit and see the hill fort?" "Hopefully. Once we're at Mam Nick, it's only a fairly short, steep scramble." "Will we need to take food?" "No, there's usually a mobile food stall in the car park below it, and sometimes an ice cream van." By the time they'd gone downstairs, Mrs. Gartside was dishing out bacon and eggs to Ralph. His father sat beside him, a used plate wiped clean, indicating he'd already had his fill. Both were in discussion, the latter seemingly agitated about something. "Good morning, everybody," Rosie said. "Aye, it's a lovely day, lass," the old farmer responded, his mood changing in an instant. "Did they both have a good sleep? What are their plans for today, our Connie?" "I'm taking Rosie over Mount Famine and then up Rushup Edge and on to Malc Cowle." "Eh, lass, are they sure it's a good walk?" "That's why we're going there. Not much point if it's not a good walk, is it?" The old man laughed. "I wish I could keep up with thee, Connie, love, I really do." He rose from his seat and left the room, emerging in moments, wearing a rather ragged old coat and a battered and equally old flat cloth cap. "Right, I'll love thee and leave thee, and mind you remember what I said, Ralph." "Everything will be fine, feyther. Stop fretting." "Well, look on. I won't be back till late afternoon. I'll go and pick old Sutcliffe's brains about his self-catering barn, and then I'm off to see our Richard and Jem in Bradwell." "OK, feyther, I'll see to things here." "Well, just don't forget that Ewing barn. I reckon she's about to drop twins, and she always has problems dropping more than one." "Don't worry, feyther." "I can't help worrying, lad. I dunna know what we're going to do about cows, unless we can find somebody else to take milk." He was about to close the kitchen door behind him when he turned and grinned at Rosie. "Have a good day, lass, and don't let that doubt of mine lead you into mischief." Connie exclaimed, turning to Ralph as soon as her father had disappeared. "I was hoping you and Titch would come with us." "So did I," Rosie said, without thinking. Ralph gave her a bemused look and then turned to his sister as Rosie blushed. "It can't be helped, Connie, but take Titch, he'll keep you out of trouble." "Fat chance, I'm always dragging him out of holes. He's never got me out of one yet." "Well, there's a first time for everything, how I come." "Can I get a word in sideways?" "Porridge first, please, Mum," Connie responded, whilst Rosie nodded her head to second the motion. Mrs. Gartside retreated to her stove once more, wondering when her guests would appear in the front parlour. After breakfast, Ralph went into the yard, returning moments later with a stick in his hand. "I've made this for you, Connie." His sister bridled. "I don't need a walking stick, Ralph. I'm not an old maid." "Well, don't take it then. There's plenty of able-bodied folk will be proud to have that. I use a stick myself when I'm climbing steep slopes." He broke into a laugh. "I'm sorry. I suppose you're going to be sensible and take the easy way, aren't you?" "Oh, no, I'm not." She glared at him for a moment, but then put out her hand. "Let me see it." He handed it over. She weighed it up. The knobbly hazel shaft felt smooth to the touch. He'd obviously spent a lot of time sanding it shiny smooth before applying the varnish, but it was the top that was its crowning glory. It consisted of an intricately shaped and highly polished ram's horn. After some time of close and detailed inspection, she turned her sharp green eyes onto him. "It's beautiful, Ralph," she said quietly. "It must have taken you ages. Thank you ever so much." His eyes lit up. "Do you really like it, Con?" "Of course I do. In fact, I might take it with me after all, just in case Rosie gets tired. It might come in handy for her." "I'll make one for you, Rosie. I'll try and have it ready in a few weeks' time." With that he turned on his heels, and they watched him as he crossed the yard and disappeared through the small gap in the wall that led to the field where the sheep had been brought down to lamb. "Ralph's ever so clever," Connie said. "He's ever so lovely," Rosie declared. Connie gave her a look, suppressing a giggle. "Romance is in the air. It happens every spring," she remembered her mother once saying. But she decided to keep her thoughts to herself, for the time being at least. Nonetheless, she couldn't help wondering how Ralph would react when she finally told him he had an ardent admirer, who on more than one occasion had said he was a lovely boy. The two girls sat side by side near the trig point on Malc Cowle, enjoying the warm sun, the view over the Winnott's Pass, and the plateau of the White Peak. Connie had explained that the ridge of Rushupedge and that of Malc Cowle marked the boundary of the Dark Peak, so called because the predominant rocks were comprised of millstone grit, with its limestone counterpart. Rosie had been struck by the sharp contrast between the dark dry stone walls of their immediate area and the bright white walls of the latter. Furthermore, the grass and vegetation over the valley was a much brighter green than the dark olives and browns of their immediate surroundings. Connie had also taken the trouble to take her down onto the main road before retracing their steps and making the final ascent of Malc Cowle. She'd shown her the junction where the road swung right to access Winnott's Pass, and from there make its way to the village of Castleton in the Oak Valley far below. At this junction, however, she'd branched left where the old coach road had taken the shorter route, snaking along the southern face of the steep-sided hill before descending steeply. "Only walkers and cyclists can use it now," she explained. "Malc Cowle is basically a massive lump of gritstone lying on top of shale, which is unstable. Large sections have slipped." She'd shown her to the top section of what had once been the main road, now closed off to traffic. Great cracks zigzagged along the old tarmac, and in more than one place large sections of the road were 10 feet below what had once been their adjoining surface. "That's why it's called the Shivering Mountain," she informed a friend. "It's always on the move." Once having retraced their steps to Mam Nick, where the road into Edale left the main road through a narrow valley separating Rushupedge from Malc Cowle, they'd soon accessed a footpath over a stile and made it to the high point of the latter. Here, both girls had been glad to flop down onto the sheep-cropped turf to rest their weary limbs. "Oh my goodness, where did he come from?" Connie laughed at Rosie's exclamation. A young man had suddenly appeared over their immediate horizon, having soared upwards on a thermal, transported through the air by means of his hang glider. He hovered straight in front of them, only a few yards away as if held in the air by an unseen hand, before soaring upwards once more and to their right. Rosie gazed in wondering admiration, her eyes following every graceful manoeuvre of the pilot. "I wish I could do that," she finally ejaculated. "It must be absolutely amazing." "So would I," her companion concurred. "He soars like a buzzard on outstretched wings." She turned to Rosie, suddenly serious. "That reminds me of something. When I first lost my leg, I had terrible problems, Rosie. I was so sad all the time. I thought my world had come to an end. I started having all kinds of nightmares and funny things happen when I was awake." "How do you mean?" "I'd suddenly get a pain in my foot as if I had cramp in my toes or something, but it was my right foot and I didn't have a right foot. Weird things like that. Sometimes it would be a sudden stabbing pain and sometimes like an electric shock. Anyway, it went on for months. Sometimes I'd be fine for weeks at a time, and then suddenly it would start all over again. It must have been awful. Yes, it was. It drove me mad. My hand would go down to the spot and there'd be nothing there, except for hard plastic and metal if I had my leg on. But then, one night, I went to bed early. I was really tired for some reason. It was raining and there was a wind and the old tree was creaking like anything. It must have been spooky. No, I quite like it. It's like music. I find it soothing. I love it when the rain rattles against the window. Anyway, I went off to sleep, and I had the most fantastic dream. The rain had stopped. It was a starlit night, and there was a full moon. I found myself running up to the mermaid's pool. It was shimmering silver, and I dived straight in. Next thing, I realized I couldn't get out, and I thought I would drown. It became very cold, really freezing, and then somebody had hold of me and everything went black. I woke up in a great cave and the mermaid sat next to me, except she wasn't a mermaid at all. She had legs and she was wearing a beautiful long white shimmering dress of some white silky material I'd never seen the like of. She was combing my hair and singing softly in a language I didn't understand. Then she asked in English how I'd got there with only one leg. She had a soft sing-song accent that seemed like a mixture of Welsh and Irish. I didn't know how I'd got there, really. I thought I'd run there. I'd somehow forgotten I only had one leg. What happened then? How did you escape? I didn't want to escape. It was lovely and warm, and there was a kind of pale pinkish glow about everything. She was lovely, and I felt safe with her. But then she said I must go, and she carried me further into the cave. There was a giant bird. It looked like a buzzard, but much bigger. She placed me on its back and told me to grip its feathers tight, and then it took off, but it flew out the way we had come and dived into the water. I thought I was going to drown again, but next minute we were bursting out of the pool into bright warm sunlight, and it carried me all the way home, soaring and diving on the way. I remember wondering how I could make my way across the yard on one leg, but the very next minute Ralph was waking me up to carry me downstairs for breakfast, and I realized it was all a dream. Rosie didn't say a word, remembering all too vividly her own dream just the previous night. The thing is, Rosie, I've never really been unhappy since that moment, and I've never had any phantom pains in the missing part of my leg either. It was as though I'd come to terms with the fact that the bottom half of my right leg had gone forever. She smiled before continuing. Ralph used to tell me there's no such word as can't. Now I know what he meant, and I also realise that nothing is really impossible. All I have to do is try, and I can make things happen, if I really want them to happen, and work at it long enough. That's amazing, Rosie said quietly. She wondered if she should relate her own dream, but decided not to. Instead, she suggested they walk down to the car park and get an ice cream before returning to the farm. However, before they arrived, Connie came up with another surprise. I just remembered, in my dream the water nymph told me her name was Coventina. I'd never heard that name before. When I asked Ralph, he told me it was the name of the Celtic water goddess.